Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the big games from this past weekend. Got into Arch's struggles up there in Columbus. Definitely worrisome, but not necessarily. I wouldn't sell your stock at least too early, and if you are, I'll go ahead and take it from you. LSU gets a big time win on the backs of their defense. Weirdly enough, Miami and Carson Beck play some really good football and get a big time win over Notre Dame and whatever Alabama put on tape against Florida State. Florida State gets a big time win 31-17 over Alabama, and Alabama drops very far in the AP poll for the first time in a long time. But we had other games this past weekend. We won't get to all of them that I wanted to talk about. Apologies again for the scheduling stuff this week, but we got a number of games that I want to talk about, and we're going to start all the way back on Friday night. Auburn gets a big time win over Baylor 38-24, and they won this game without even having to crack into their wide receiver group. You already have all of those guys on the outside. Cam Coleman, Horatio Fields, Eric Singleton, you have Perry Thompson, you have Malcolm Simmons. You got dudes. They didn't have to do any of that. Jackson Arnold goes for 137 and 2 scores with his legs. They go for 300 total yards on the ground in this game against a Baylor defense that I don't necessarily think is going to be absolutely incredible. They should be more hard-nosed than that, and maybe they are. And Auburn's offensive line and offense in general was just able to move them around. I do think the offensive line for Auburn is going to be nasty this year. I can tell you that much. But Baylor's got to find a run defense and a run offense going forward if they're going to want to be successful. Obviously, this is going to be a bigger group up front than you will normally face in the Big 12. Auburn has probably one of the best offensive lines in the SEC, has a defensive line led by Keldrick Falk and a number of big-time guys. So not overly surprising necessarily, but it can't just be Sawyer Robertson running out there and trying to make every play, because he will make a couple of mistakes, and without Dawson Pendergrass in your backfield, it's got to be Bryson Washington. You only had 64 rushing yards in this game. The Auburn D-line totally manhandled the Baylor offensive line. You got to figure it out one way or the other if Baylor's going to get back into the Big 12 conversation, because there are some good defensive lines in the Big 12, namely Utah and Texas Tech. You're going to have to be ready for those teams. I can almost promise you that. But back to Auburn, incredible stuff. I still have questions around this team. There's still questions of once you do have to air the ball out, what does that look like? Does Jackson Arnold avoid mistakes, or does he start throwing into tight windows? That's a big-time question. There's no doubt about that. What I can tell you is they have this run game to fall back on. They're going to have every ability to do something special. And we just talked about Alabama struggling with running quarterbacks. If they were to have played this past weekend, Jackson Arnold would have done terrible, terrible things to that defense. But they got time to figure that out. We'll see what happens at the end of the season. Really impressed with Auburn. Still don't necessarily think they're going to light the world on fire. Do think much higher of them than I did going into the weekend. I can promise you that. On Friday night as well, Georgia Tech got a gross win of sorts. They turned over the ball the first 3 times they touched it. It was really bad to start this game, especially for Haynes King and whoever the center was. I can't exactly remember, but a couple of bad snaps in that. But Colorado takes an early lead, and then Georgia Tech kind of locked in and kind of got their feet about them, tied this thing, I believe, going into halftime, and then really took over in the second half. Haynes King, I don't know what that guy's made of, but somehow he just keeps popping up, and it doesn't look good most of the time. He pops up and he grabs something, or he's limping off the field, or he's limping back to the huddle. It doesn't look good. He finds a way to get it done, and he made a massive, massive play to give them the win at the end of this one. Had over 100 rushing yards, as you can imagine, in this game, and Colorado was interesting because I like a lot of the things that they showed. The run game is so much better this year. They're getting more push. I love that Michael Welch is getting the ball consistently. They're going to be volatile. They're going to be a weird team this year. The offensive line, while a little bit better, is still a little bit porous, and Caden Salter isn't Shedeur Sanders. I think we figured that out on Friday night. Now, he made a number of great plays, including that touchdown pass where he just threw that ball maybe a million miles an hour, but at the end of the day, it is going to be a weird team. I think they're going to win games that you don't expect them to win. I think they're going to lose games that you don't expect them to lose, but I think they continue to move in the right direction, at least as a program. I think when you have a team that didn't run the ball well at all last year, now that they can run the ball just a little bit, you get that little tick better, or at least that little tick higher of a floor, I should say. Next year, maybe you figure out the run defense just a little bit better, or throughout this year, and then you go into next year with Julian Lewis. Maybe you have a little bit more confidence around the entire team, and you continue moving this program forward. So, although you did lose this game that you probably should have won with 3 turnovers from the other side, you also have certain things that are moving forward in that program that I thought we're going to take you a little bit longer. So we'll see how that develops throughout the year. We'll see what Colorado becomes. It's going to be interesting to watch this team. I think they're going to be a little bit all over the place, as they have been really since Dion has gotten there. But for Georgia Tech, if they clean a couple of those things up, Clemson comes to town in 2 weeks. Now, I'm not saying Georgia Tech's going to win that game. What I am saying is Clemson's got to be ready for that game. It is going to be a very, very tough battle, especially if that offensive line really does struggle. The Georgia Tech defensive line isn't downright special. They can do some really interesting things with Jordan Vanderberg and a lot of those guys on the interior. So it could get interesting, is what I'll say right there. I do think Georgia Tech, you got through a game that, frankly, you probably shouldn't have with a win. Now you move forward and see what you can do against Clemson. Obviously, we'll figure out more about Georgia Tech going forward, but a gross game, but a win at the end of the day, and Brent Key's guys just continue to move forward to maybe a CFP berth in the future. Tulane got a dominating win over Northwestern, and we got a little bit of drama after this game talking about the jersey situation around Tulane. I don't know the situation there. I can't think of a good argument why Northwestern wouldn't let them wear those jerseys. At the end of the day, I assume it's somewhere in the middle of what the two parties are saying. At the end of the day, not the thing that we're going to talk about right now. We got to talk about Tulane. This is a team that was thrown together in a lot of different ways late in the season, especially at quarterback, and Jake Retzlaff put on a show. He had almost 300 total yards, had 2 touchdowns, including a long touchdown run, a huge boost to a team that already had plenty of talent, already had great things on the outside. When you have a guy that can do that type of stuff with his legs, you're going to open up a lot of different windows. There's no doubt about that. And this team is going to get better and better as he gets better and better and more comfortable in this offense. On the defensive side of the ball, you got 4 INTs in this game. You had 3 sacks to go along with it. This team is so dangerous. They are a team that, if they can go on the road this weekend to beat South Alabama, they come back home and it's Darian Mensah coming to town. It's a guy that a lot of the guys on that team, I know the head coach of that team, knows very well, and I don't think they have any ill will towards him. I know that they want to beat him. I can promise you that. So I think they're in a position where maybe they can win this weekend. If they beat Duke, they're off to the races, and they are by far the G5 team that has every advantage to go to the CFP. I was wrong a lot this weekend, but I was very right about Tulane. They did some incredible things, and I think as Jake Retzlaff gets more comfortable, this team's only going to get more and more dangerous. Tennessee gets a really comfortable win over Syracuse. There was a moment there where Syracuse looked like they might have made it close. Didn't end up happening. The story of this game is Joey Aguilar. Did Tennessee upgrade at quarterback? This was a conversation that when this all went down, when the Nico, Joey, let's call it a trade, went down between Tennessee and UCLA, I thought Tennessee downgraded. I'll be totally honest with you. I thought Tennessee did a great thing. They stood on business. They did exactly what they were supposed to do in that situation. But it was going to come at the detriment of this team this upcoming year, not at the detriment of the program, which is more important, obviously. It might not come at the detriment of this team this year. Joey Aguilar fits into this offense like a glove, and it's something that a number of people have talked about, and frankly, I did a little bit of earmuffs with it because I just didn't fully believe. I should have believed. I did tell you on Saturday that he was going to rip the ball more than Nico was. He wasn't going to put big plays in his pocket. He wasn't going to take off running when you have a guy streaking downfield on a big post pattern. It didn't happen on Saturday. Joey Aguilar ripped that ball, made a great play to Braylon Staley, and they got a team. This offense ran better than it really has since Hendon Hooker was in a Vols jersey. It was an incredible, incredible performance. It was a team that looked like a Josh Heupel team. Now, I do have some worries about the defense. I think Syracuse is going to be a formidable team, so maybe 26 points isn't terrible. Not ideal for a defense that very much wants to compete with the big boys and has, elite games and elite teams coming up, including a Georgia team not too far down the road. So a lot of things to figure out, obviously, for Tennessee. If Braylon Staley can keep playing good football, if Mike Matthews can keep coming on, if Chris Brazzell can play good football for them, this is going to be a good football team. There's no doubt about that. Love Peyton Lewis, love Deshaun Bishop. I think they have an offense that can really do some damage. Maybe some things to figure out on the defensive side of the ball, but Tennessee got off to the start that I think all of them hoped in. They got a quarterback that makes them very excited for the first time in a while. And then they got to watch this. Utah wins 43-10 over UCLA. It was a mismatch from the absolute jump. From pretty much every single position group on the field, it was a mismatch in favor of Utah. But we'll start with Devon Dampier. Special player in every sense of the word. Almost 300 total yards, 3 scores, 2 passing, 1 rushing. He is everything for that offense. He is everything for just about every offense he's been on in college football. and he showed it on Saturday. He was absolutely incredible in this game, looked very comfortable in an offense that he would be very comfortable in, but still throwing to new players, around new players, being protected by new players. It's a really, really hard thing to do and do this comfortably. He did it incredibly well. And the Utah defense, terrifying, all over the field, and Nico very much felt that. He did not look good. The offensive line in front of him looked a whole lot worse. It was very, very bad from UCLA pretty much from the jump. At the end of the day, like at Tennessee, he made some plays with his legs, nothing really special through the air, and a pick to go along with it. It was a tough day from Nico right after he watched the guy that took his job do some pretty incredible things. So for Tennessee fans, congratulations, I guess. Everything kind of worked out for you. In the end, you saved a little bit of money and maybe got a better quarterback. But at the end of the day, it's going to be really interesting to watch Utah move forward. They're the team in the Big 12 that impressed me the most. This past weekend, there were a couple of teams that just looked a little bit shaky at times. We'll get to another team that did not look shaky here in a second. But UCLA, you're probably going to find your way back to the bottom of the Big 10 this year. It was very, very bad performance, and I can't say it's going to get easier on the lines of scrimmage for you once you walk into Big 10 play. South Carolina gets a big-time win, 24-11 over Virginia Tech. This was a game that wasn't all that pretty. I think the scoreboard might show a different story than what was actually on TV. Now, not to take anything away from South Carolina. Lenora Sellers played some really good football. You finally got Nick Harbor to make the big-time play everyone's been waiting for. That defensive line is downright nasty, at least against Virginia Tech, and that's something we'll watch going forward. But the reality is, there were two big plays in this game. It was the punt return by Vakari Swain. It was the big play to Nick Harbor. And that was really it. It's not to say the South Carolina offense was downright anemic, but for about 2.5 quarters there, they were nowhere to be found. And they have to figure that out as they move into SEC play, because you're not going to have the opening that Virginia Tech gave you in this game. And frankly, that Kyron Drones gave you in this game. He did not play very good football. Started early, started pretty hot, made some nice throws, and then was just all over the place the rest of the way, and a lot of that had to do with his offensive line got ate for dinner. And frankly, on the other side, the South Carolina offensive line didn't play that great of football. They had moments, they did okay. They didn't run the ball all that well in this game, and Lenora Sellers was kind of running for his life in a number of different ways. They had 4 sacks, did Virginia Tech. Bad rushing game from South Carolina. It was just not the way that you think South Carolina is going to be able to go about winning 10 games or getting to the CFP, doing the things that they want to do. So they have things to clean up. There's no doubt about that. But the reality of this game was you're going to Atlanta to play a home game, quote unquote, which isn't a home game, but you're playing a team that very much wants to make a statement. You have a lot of pressure on your shoulders. You got the win. You move forward. You figure some things out. Obviously, SEC play will reveal a lot more about this team, but frankly, when you have Lenora Sellers, Dylan Stewart, and Nick Harbor on your football team, you're going to have the 3 best athletes on the field. Almost every single time you step on the field, frankly, I thought about this. I think the only way that's not the case is when they play, if they play in a playoff, Ohio State. I think that's the only team that has outright athletes that are better than those 3 guys that I just named. They're going to have freaks. And if those freaks can take them to a CFP, all's well that ends well. But I do think there are some worries around those freaks. That would make things a little bit tougher. But when you got 3 guys that can do what Lenora Sellers, Dylan Stewart, and Nick Harbor can do, you can do some pretty special things. And then finally, the game that capped the weekend, TCU drags North Carolina 48-14. The debut of Bill Belichick was far from pretty. Let's just leave it at that for the time being. It was a good first drive, and then you got punched in the mouth and just did not get up from the rest of the way. Incredible game from TCU. Not necessarily perfect, definitely some things they want to figure out, but if that offense is going to play at that clip the rest of the season, it's going to be really, really hard to beat them. I can tell you that much. And it does go to show you that college football is a Jimmy and Joe's type of league, because they ran a lot of similar things to what Matt Patricia ran against Texas. They don't have the dudes to run that type of stuff. So TCU blew them off the line of scrimmage, ran for a ton of yards in this game. Jordan Dwyer, the wide receiver that came over from Idaho, had over 100 yards and a score. Kavarian Barnes in the backfield, very, very talented running back that's going to lead the way for them there. Incredible game from TCU. For North Carolina, I think it might be Max Johnson's team going forward. Now, I don't think they did a ton to help Gio Lopez. They didn't utilize his legs the way that you probably should have, but Max Johnson comes in, goes 9 for 11 with 103 yards and a touchdown to his brother Jake, which was a pretty cool moment after he had a terrible, terrible injury. Very excited to see Max Johnson back on the football field. overall, the big takeaway is they're not there from a talent level. They're just not there even for a TCU team. They're not going to be there for a Clemson team or a Miami team or a number of teams in the ACC. It's not going to be a great season for North Carolina. I do think they're going to get better. I do think Max Johnson, at least if this is the way they're going to call an offense, he's going to give you the better chance to win going forward. We don't know the status of Gio Lopez. Did go out with an injury, not just bench, so that is something to keep in mind. We'll see how that develops, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be perfect, and we'll see how this unfolds. I don't think it's going to be great, but at the end of the day, TCU gets a big-time win. North Carolina got something to figure out at the very least, but an incredible weekend of games. There's a number of other games that we could talk about. Mississippi State got a precarious at times, but relatively comfortable win over Southern Mississippi, and a number of other games that we didn't quite get a chance to fully get into. We'll get into a couple of them in the last segment here. We got some winners and losers from this past weekend. One of the bigger winners was freshman quarterbacks, and we'll talk about them right after this, so stick with us.